Ravi, sir.
Hi, morning, everyone. Morning. Thank you all for logging in, right, and attending this panel discussion on digital government and society, right? Before we start, I'd just like to define two terms. The first is digital transformation, which is the process of using digital technologies to improve existing processes. And the second term is digital government, which is defined in Trinidad, while using the definition in Trinidad 2018 National ICT Plan. It refers to the use of digital technologies in an integrated part of government's modernization strategies. Right, so basically digital governments and societies, which this conversation is about, is simply governments and societies that utilize digital transformation and digital technologies to improve their operations and lives, right? The reason why I define the two terms is because when the panelists and the conversation start, you might hear the term digital transformation coming in the talk about digital government and stuff like that. Right. The panel discussion is a big one, right? Is divided up into 4 sections, right? We're starting off the first section with examples of digital governance via the presentations from our established panelists, right? And then we're going on to talk about some of the trending topics in digital governance, then some of the challenges, right? And finally, we're closing off with a discussion on what we can expect in the future in this evolving area, right? So without further delay, let me introduce to you our distinguished panelists, right? I'm seeing Lequanne here, right? So first is Lequanne Collins-Bacchus, who is the Senior Advisor at the Treasury Board of Canada. Right, Lequanne did past work in Lequanne did past work on Ontario's digital service data strategy and pursued her graduate studies in the number 1 nation in digital governance, Estonia, where she focused on technology, governance, and sustainability, which means that she is very knowledgeable about the subject matter, right? Lequanne, can you please say hi to everyone?
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you all. Thanks for having me.
Okay, right. Our next panelist is Mr. Ravi Sankar, right? Who is a partner in the head of the cyber technology consulting group, KPMG in Jamaica, that has over 1,400 employees throughout the Caribbean, right? Ravi is also the Microsoft Alliance lead and has over 15 years experience in the Caribbean and Europe in the business development and information technology security, right? Ravi, are you there? Could you say hi to everyone? All right, so we're just waiting a little while for Ravi to log in. By the meantime, I'll introduce our final panelists. Last but certainly not least, is our local expert, Mr. Wendell Mitchell, right, who is the National Chief Digital Officer at the Ministry of Digital Transformation in Trinidad and Tobago. Wendell has over 30 years experience in the areas of ICT and telecommunications. He has worked at both engineering and managerial positions in various institutions in Trinidad, such as BWIA, TSTT, RBTT, where he has gained tremendous experience in IT governance, digital transformation, and cybersecurity. Wendell, can you say hi to everyone?
Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to our discussion.
Right. I'm now seeing Ravi there. Ravi, could you say hi to everyone, please?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Apologies for being a minute or two late, but really pleased to be here on this panel.
All right. Right, so that is our distinguished panelists, right? So I would start with a flavor of the international panelists first, which is Lequanne, then I'll go to Ravi, and then we'd hear a take on our local star boy, which is Wendell, right? So Lequanne, could you deliver your presentation to everyone, please?
Yep, 1 second. Can you see my screen?
Um,
Can you see my
Dev,
screen there?
could you guys allow Lequanne to share screen?
I think share screen is enabled. I see it on my own here.
All right, I see a presentation coming up.
All right.
You're seeing it?
Yes, we're seeing it. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. So good morning, everybody. Happy to meet you all virtually. And I'm going to walk through the Canadian context on digital government. I'm going to go through a few of our successes, a few of our failures, and just give a perspective that's, from a larger country, and just ways that we've hacked our bureaucracy, which is kind of how we take it in terms of figuring out how to, deliver services in a more digital way, but also that transition period and what that looks like within our Canadian context. So a little bit about me. As you heard, I've worked at the federal level, as a senior advisor, the CIO's office for Government Canada, as well as at the Ontario Digital Service, advising the digital government minister there on various files, including the first data strategy for the province. And then I've also been a Corporate Canada Fellow, so I've worked as a product manager in that role where it's actually build out products, deliver products, and then also having a background in the studies in Estonia. So I'll be bringing a policy side as well as the technical side to what it looks like to digitally transform various approaches to digital government. And I want to center our conversation today from my perspective, with these two quotes, which kind of highlight my mindset when it comes to transformation, which is, you don't want to simply make things digital. You want to be able to improve the social lives of people that live in your nation, as well as good opportunities for innovation and change that's supported by government and empowering the citizens, empowering your great thinkers of your country, empowering your innovators, your businesses, right alongside that. So the first tenet I would say within our context is essentially centering people when it comes to transformation. Traditionally government operates without input from citizens. Usually a lot of our consultation with the public in the past was around, very traditional, civil services or civil engagement, such as voting or your campaigning, things like that. But within the government context and digital, one major change was essentially engaging people and citizens at a research level. So they're actually testing your product with citizens. So, working with the most vulnerable people in the communities, such as people who don't have internet access, to people who are unable to, access the service, actually looking at and testing products with them. So if someone takes 10 minutes to use a website that's meant to renew their driver's license, or they give up, why is that? And actually looking at that bounce rate and figuring out what part of the process is frustrating, and then making those changes to make it easier for citizens. One other area was language. For us in Canada, one thing we faced in the past was a lot of government, communication with the public was very legalese in its context. So, it wasn't plain language, it wasn't easy to understand. Instructions to complete forms were very verbose or difficult to understand. Everybody doesn't speak English, and we have many languages here. So for us, that was one major area, which was just actually speaking in regular English when engaging with the public. And then service design standards. So, for example, when you're using a government website, essentially, making sure that the person that's engaged in government sees the same design, the same website, whether it's on a phone, on a computer, whether they're at the actual service desk in person. It's a consistent look, a consistent design, so people aren't confused or having to go through several different routes to finish one form or finish one service that they need. And then opening up the data. So, without data, there's no digital. So we can't actually transform new services if we can't access the data across several departments. So for us, that was a major concern we had to put to make sure that, essentially if one person goes to one department for one service versus taxes, it should be able to go to another service and then be able to use that same information on our end versus them have to fill out another form out to make sure that they can access another service. Reducing time for citizens is a major part of one of our ways to improve a government experience for citizens. And then essentially allowing ourselves to work faster through agile approaches and allowing the deployment of changes to happen in a more efficient way, and by reducing processes, by changing rules, updating policy, updating law, which we'll see going forward. This is one of the service standards we've implemented. Every year this is updated. And so you'll see, it's small here, but you'll see things like, being consistent across platforms, designing services from start to finish, and making sure that that process is a smooth process that can be replicated in other departments. Making sure that web privacy is included in the design of a product so that you don't have to go back and change the service again to include a privacy and security process. Measuring performance, making sure that it's accessible, so including, standards such as WCAG 3 standard, which essentially ensures that websites design are accessible from the beginning and including that in how we actually build our digital services. And so from the policy side, a lot of the changes we had to make to enable digital. So for example, when it comes to laws, policies, guidelines, a lot of our laws in the past required in-person or paper-based processes, such as, you have to sign something in person, or you need to go in person for one step of the process to do, for example, for a legal service, you might have to go in person for one part of the process, thereby extending the service to a few months versus a few days. And so for us, and this is fairly recent, within the last 5 years, we've had to update our acts that enabled and empowered people to use a digital-first approach, such as changing laws regarding legal documents, changing laws when it comes to signing things and other areas of process, digital service standards, API guidelines, which essentially empower people to use APIs, principles around AI use, so use of machine learning when it comes to certain services and when it can be used and when it can't be used. And then essentially giving guidelines to all digital teams when it comes to service design and process design to ensure that it can be integrated to other departments. This is one example within Ontario. So for context, Canada has several provinces. Ontario is one of them. And so there's about a few million people that live here in this one province. And so one of the internal services, which was Oregon Council for the government, this was one of the first successes in Ontario. So on the left hand, you'll see that this was the original process, paper-based, in-person, very confusing. It relies on one person to understand and organize all of this data in a paper-based form. And essentially that's changed a few laws to allow digital version to be viewed as a legal version and then made into an online portal. And so on the right-hand side, you'll see the end product after testing with various people that work with orders and counsel, looking at what's important information to include on order and counsel, and looking at how they can integrate with the people that already work in this office in their processes, a faster way of going online and training those people to manage the online system alongside the in-person system. This has now switched over time to an online-only service.
Recording in progress.
This is one example of how you work with the people that already are in a certain department to help them stand up a digital version of their service versus simply contracting it out or getting somebody else that's outside of government to provide that service. And then so this is one last slide regarding key ways to think about implementing digital within government. You want to be able to work with the people who are already in departments, who work with data to develop principles for how you want to work with digital products. You want to be able to consult with them and ensure that they feel empowered because they're the ones who will be giving you information when it comes to what is important in a service and you're able to streamline that service for a digital approach. You want to build teams. Within our context, we've had a lot of success when it comes to providing services through a digital service accelerator. So essentially, even within the Department of Government Consumer Services, so under the Minister of Digital Government, they were able to stand up the Ontario Digital Service and also at the federal level. And that service is basically an accelerator for several products to essentially be the example of what it looks like to change the service digitally and provide those consulting services to other departments so that they can also do the same thing. Essentially making sure that you're teaching, this is the change management component where you're teaching the employees and your colleagues and people that are working with you how to work with the new system, how to build and test their own prototypes within existing teams and support the development of talent across the government, and then incorporating privacy, accessibility, and working openly by design. And so on the technical side, essentially the major shift in mindset is centering the user. So how do we help the user access the service more easily, more seamlessly, and essentially, focusing on users who are vulnerable first, such as somebody who doesn't have internet and how they can access the service, and then building from there. So for example, it could be looking like something where you have you start with a paper-based version, which is what already exists, and then work your way up to a digital version. So you have that perspective from both ends, somebody who might need to go in person to a service desk, or somebody who can actually just work on their own from the comfort of their sofa at home. And you want to test, prototype, iterate, improve based on feedback from testing with citizens themselves. And in our context within Canada, we do pay people. So, it could be a gift card, it could be an online gift card that we give out. So we give out some Honans gift cards here. But essentially you want to test with actual users from the public so they can tell you what's wrong with your service and you can make those changes. And then you want to scale that product to the rest of the public. And so, for example, I'm not sure if anybody's heard of CRB, but within COVID-19, the Canadian government gave our citizens about $2,000 biweekly to citizens to deal with, staying at home, loss of jobs, and so forth. One of the major shifts within Canadian ways of working was that we actually had to remove barriers. So to provide welfare services to citizens before this experience it took many, many months to qualify. Many forms, a lot of information has to be provided up front before you can even qualify to get, welfare from the government. But with CRB, what is a great example here is that we actually had to think about, okay, what can we do to make a service available within 3 business days? What is the essential information we can ask for and we can verify later? And then what does it look like to work with what we have and build from there, and then iteratively change over time. So for example, one of those major approaches was essentially scaling by citizens enrolling by birth month. So, you were advised to, like, if you're born in January, you would enroll by like a certain date. And so you were able to, over time, add more citizens. For context, within Canada, we had 38 million people. So it was a lot to do that all at once. And we've seen examples where in the US, with healthcare, the healthcare website, are able to try to log on at the same time. And so it crashed the computers and the databases that were holding up that service. Whereas in our context, we were able to over time add more and more people and manage that growth and scaling across Canada as people signed up for the service. So here's an example of that. So you'll see, on one day, we had certain people sign up by, so Monday, January, February, March, Tuesday, April, May, June, and you can see so forth. That's how it worked. And so that helped manage a lot of the growth that was very rapid within a few months, and also enabled the government to negotiate with various vendors, so with Microsoft, with various vendors, to scale internally, so providing more devices, laptops, computers to internal employees who were now work from home, as well as externally providing services to citizens as people had to work from home as well. And so this is a great example of how, when people had to file their taxes at the end of the year, having received the CRB service, we have a private, as an example of a private company that's integrated into our CRA, which is the revenue agency databases. So you can actually file online. Yeah, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
Okay, very good. So you can actually file online with your online service. So essentially using TurboTax, a private company that work with the public, which is CRA, and essentially filing online and making it a very seamless service. So it's an example of a public-private partnership to file your taxes within the Canadian context. And then for sharing of data, so for example, in Ontario, one thing that really set the standard for sharing data to start doing the digital approaches to services, which was the public budget. This is something that you see a lot in many countries when they start open government initiatives. That's usually the first place that they start, which is opening up the data when it comes to how government spends their money, where it goes, how much is spent on IT contracts, and basically criticizing that and looking at what do we need to actually spend. Canada notoriously overspends. We have about $4.2 billion in spending. This is not to say that we have amazing services, just because we spend more. I will say that a lot of that money does go towards maintaining old systems. We have a lot of legacy data, legacy systems in Canada, because the country is so large and many of the provinces work independently of each other. So this isn't to say that you need to spend more to have better services. It's more so to say that, within even our services that you've seen so far, that we've changed.
Lequanne, could you kindly try to wrap up very quickly? We're running over time. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. And so those services essentially were developed with less funding than even with using the past for many services. Going forward, there's examples of API stores, open government, partnering with citizens to build certain products, partnering with the public to build digital trust services, so credentials to help businesses provide services and build contact with the government more easily. And then we also have examples of, failures, which show us that, a lot of our successes are initiatives that are tested, iterative, frugal, and have an agile approach are much more successful than simply spending, all over the time, all over IT. And we see that, being more frugal has been much more successful in our context. And so, yeah, in Estonia, you also have examples of digital ID. I'll skip this for now, but I think that, the whole idea about digital ID isn't necessarily having the ID, it's having access to your own data. And so, yeah.
Lequanne, I'm sorry to do this, but we're really running over time and we wouldn't have time for the other speakers. We would try to incorporate some of the stuff in your presentation in the discussion. Sorry about that, okay?
No problem. Okay, thank you.
All right, cool. All right, so basically, Lequanne said a tremendous amount of information, right? And she initially started the conversation about, the how we actually perform digital transformation in the government area, right? And it consisted of three main points. First, you have to identify the process, right, that you want to digitize. The second stage is performing the planning, right, which did a lot. She said 13 points for Ontario and stuff like that. And the third phase is the execution. And she highlighted in the execution part is that you sometimes need to change your governing laws in order to get past a lot of digital transformation things, right? So remember that 3 points to perform digital transformation, right? We'd go on to our next speaker now. Ravi, could you please share your screen and do your presentation?
I can, thank you. Thank you very much. I'll make back up some of this time so that we can get to Mr. Mitchell, who I'm very curious to listen to. The reality is that I'm coming in from KPMG, for those who don't know, and my role is head of cyber and technology enablement and technology solutions. So I'm really looking at it from the technology perspective, but also as a citizen and a user of these innovative products. What I really want to say is that, COVID has accelerated the digital journey. But this journey started decades ago. For those of us who remember, we used to write letters and send them by post, and maybe 6 weeks later, somebody would receive that message. And as time evolved, we went to faxes and now to emails, that you don't even think about letter writing in the same way. So the digital journey has started. It's nothing new. It may be a buzzword in the community today, but it's actually been ongoing for decades. And the beauty is, it's how do we move it to the next level? How are we going to use these new technologies that are emerging to transform the society that we live in? We've seen, the government digital transformation involves changing corporate culture, organizational models and methods. We have to take advantage of the emerging technologies so that we can become more efficient at doing business. And this is what it is. How do we improve the lives of the citizens of our jurisdiction, of our countries? But as I said to you before, this has already started. We're already on this journey. The days are gone when you used to have to file your tax return by filling up long pieces of paper and then going and standing in a line at the tax office just to make sure you could submit it. Now we are doing things online. We're shopping online. We've seen in Barbados as an example that you can get your driver's license online. You can get your police certificate of character online. Immigration departments are changing how visitors arrive on the island with online immigration forms. We saw that in Jamaica. We've seen it in Barbados. And COVID was a big part of that acceleration, but it's making that whole process more seamless and easier, and it allows us to sort of enjoy the technologies and make it a little bit better so persons like myself who struggle with my glasses sitting on a plane bouncing around, I can fill my form in well in advance and don't have to think about it. And literally with a QR code, walk up to the immigration officer, and 2 minutes later, I'm in the country and picking up my bags and going about my business. So we have seen that change occur, and it is something that we need to embrace. But it's critical that governments take a holistic approach. It is not a simple matter of just saying we're on this journey. So we need to benefit from economies of scale. We need to make sure that what we're doing is very coordinated, so that we can maximize these benefits. And some simple examples, having a digital ID is good, but it's much better if it's unique and universal. Offering online services is good, but it's better if it's accessed through a single point of access. So these are just some of the things that we can look at that really can better the society. And I think Lequanne actually articulated a lot of things going on in Canada that we are mirroring and seeing mirrored throughout our jurisdictions. Whether it's Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, we're seeing that process being mirrored in our territory. Finally, what I'd like to talk about is that, we need to get the right legislation. We see so many times that the technology moves faster than the legislation. And so, a good example is the digital currencies that are coming out, or the cryptocurrencies that we're seeing in the market, but no legislation to protect investors in that. So we need to bring that up to speed. The reskilling of citizens, the recent, for those who don't know, there's a new AI that's come out that's called ChatGPT, that actually wrote a paper for the Wharton School of Business and actually passed the exam. So, there's a fear going around in the community that some of these new tools will take jobs away from our citizens. So we have to be aware of that. We have to ensure that we can reskill the citizens so that they can take advantages of these new technologies. And it's absolutely key that private companies, that academics, that technology specialists, that we participate in this journey, and that we support the governments, by keeping them transparent, by holding them to the highest level of accountability, that assisting them with our knowledge, so that we can actually help them on this journey. This is not a one-way street. This is a collective effort for us to achieve a better society for all. So 10 years from now, when we look back, we're able to see how we participated and assisted on this journey. Some final thoughts, we really, like I said, we need to embrace these new technologies. It's critical. And I think that when we look back, and time will be the best judge of this, but all the pains that we go through in developing our societies and enabling our societies, as long as we keep the citizens at the core of whatever we do, and we utilize the technologies to benefit our society, this is truly a win for us. And from my perspective, I see myself as someone who is there to support wherever I can, to help enable governments achieve the right path, and sort of see myself, in 10 years looking back thinking, wow, look where we were and look where we are today. So I'd just like to close off by saying thank you. I did speed that up, so in the interest of time, and I'll pass it back to you, Ken, and I'm really looking forward to listening to the other speakers. So thank you very, very much.
All right, thank you so much, Ravi. That was a very concise and very well-informed presentation. One of the main things that came out of Ravi's presentation is the advantages of having digital governance, right? He said that it makes government operations and systems, it improves in its responsiveness, efficiency, right? It also is, equitable delivery for all public service, and it improves the public life for its citizens. And one of the main things too it ensures transparency because everything is digital, right? So thank you very much, Ravi. And we'll go on to our last presentation now, done by Mr. Wendell Mitchell. Wendell, could you please present for us?
Certainly, thank you. Let me know when you're seeing the screen, Ken.
Yes, yes, we are seeing it, Wendell.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. And I just want to start the presentation. I don't know how many people are as old as me, but growing up watching Sesame Street, whenever I think of digital transformation, the Sesame Street skit that comes to mind is the Tweedlebugs, where they said they would take the car to the zoo. They wanted to get to the zoo, and someone suggested they take the car to the zoo. So when they brought the car, they picked up the car and they walked to the car. So technology is not of any use unless we transform our mindset and thinking and our ability to use it. So the mental model and so on. So basically, let me just go through the presentation. Yeah. So if we look,
Wendell, you went mute.
Wendell, yeah, you're muted. Could you unmute your computer, please?
sorry about that. Yeah, so basically we just look at the overview of the ministry and what we see as digital society, and then we'll move on to some of the things we're doing in digital society and digital government. So I may skip a few of the slides. Basically, in terms of our roadmap for economic recovery, we are looking at building a digital nation, building institutional capacity, and reigniting our national value system. So you have, and there are other things in the social sector in terms of women, civil society, etc. And those are some of the key outcomes we want to have as a society. And we are going to be using technology to help with some of those things. Now, in terms of the ministry itself, the mandate we have from our minister, it's a new way to address the end-to-end consumption and delivery of goods and services to customers using appropriate digital technology. So there are four takeaways from that mandate we have from our minister. One, it has to be a new way. It has to be end-to-end. And part of that, one of the things we've coined in that end-to-end is no wrong door. Delivery of service. So we have to focus on the fact that we are delivering a service, not a transaction, and that we have to use appropriate technology. And sometimes in the case of the elderly and those sort of things, appropriate technology may be no technology, but really somebody to assist them, and that person uses the technology. So it's appropriate technology is there. In terms of our program, we've broken our program into 3 buckets: digital society, to make sure that persons are literate, they have access to ICT. And in the context of what we are talking about when we move into digital economy, also that they go beyond just having access to ICT, but they can have careers in ICT. And that's where the digital economy part comes in. Then digital government, where we have efficient services and government is agile. In terms of digital society, some of the things that we have done in 3 buckets, in terms of making persons digitally literate, we have a digital skills program that we've launched. And this is not just about training persons to use IT, but also training persons for careers in IT, not just as workers, but we want to have as many entrepreneurs as possible. In terms of the basic IT training, we have a partnership with D.A.T.A, where we have 1,100 students trained. In terms of the other thing we've done is we've distributed devices through Ministry of Education, Social Services, etc. And we have activated access centers where persons who don't have access to technology, internet, we have homework supervision, and those centers can go there and get assistance. And access to internet, we have a TT Wi-Fi. That's an initiative through T.A.T, Telecommunications Authority, where the concessionaires provide free Wi-Fi access in certain public spaces like government plaza, etc. And we've just done an expression of interest for something called TV white spaces, which is to utilize the unused TV bandwidth for persons to have access to internet in rural or hard-to-reach areas. In terms of the, well, I'll skip this slide in the interest of time. Becoming digital, what goes into the mix? Online customers, we have to have customers who can access you online, so you don't have to come into the office. We must have digital collaboration, not just for the customers, but internally within work. You are assisting somebody, you must be able to collaborate digitally. And you must have certain key digital services where you deposit things online, you may dispose funds online, you have your online ledgers and accounts, because invariably, if your back office is paper, it will invariably produce a bottleneck and a challenge to end-to-end. In that regard, one of the main initiatives that the government is looking at is the EID solution. And I want to point out that the EID is a tool. Many persons are asking for the electronic ID. And I think it was Ravi who spoke about the issue of the electronic ID, and it's important that it be universal and singular. So the EID is an effort to create a universal ID where persons are identified across, in the first instance, government, and hopefully through private sector partnership with entrepreneurs. It can extend into the private arena as well. So that is where we are going with the EID system. And I want to emphasize, though, in terms of the digital transformation, one of the underemphasized elements are change management. And one of the underemphasized elements is change management. So while we're talking about the tools, hopefully in our discussion, we could come about the change management and meaningful things. Because, for instance, as a society, we all like doubles. But what, sometimes you go in a space and you always wonder, why is there a long line by one doubles man and the other doubles man has no line? So it's a matter of the quality, the taste, and the sometimes customer service as well. And therefore, all of that is a matter of people and processes. So we can, the technology should really be the last thing that comes in there. But a lot of times we fail at the digital transformation because we lead with the technology and we don't look at the people and processes. So the electronic ID is the solution that we are looking at. And the ideas would be to eliminate the use for multiple pieces of government IDs. You have faster transactions and enables you to initiate government transactions online. And you have more efficient government. You don't have to do all of these manual checks, filing paper, etc., and minimize duplicate records, etc. So that is what we are looking for, the benefits we're looking to leverage from the electronic ID. And the electronic ID framework, which will be used by citizens, residents, registered immigrants. It will be used for authentication, encryption, and digital signatures. And I don't know if you'll have time to get into the legality of that in the panel discussion, but it is important to make a distinction between digital signatures there, as opposed to what some persons may be wanting to look at advanced electronic signatures, which need certificate authority. So there are digital signatures that we can do that the present legislation allows for. So sometimes we are thinking we can't do things, but we can. And in terms of the e-identity, it must comply or satisfy personal data protection legislation, etc. Some of the things we are doing within the legislation, we are not making it mandatory. Unlike other governments, it's an opt-in and you can opt out. It is going to be zero knowledge base. So it is really, we're just identifying that this person exists. We're not going to be storing or giving out any information on the individual. And we will be using various technologies. For now, we are starting with facial recognition via hash, but in subsequent sprints, we will look at smart cards and other things, because obviously smart cards, those things require you to outfit ministries and other locations with infrastructure. And all of it will be connected by an interoperability solution and an immutable ledger. You as a citizen will always have the ability to see where your ID was accessed, who accessed it, and if you're not comfortable, you can opt out of the program. So that's the main, our main trust with respect to digital technology and digital transformation in the ministry at this time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Wendell, for that very informative presentation. Right. As you could see, Trinidad is well on its way to full digital transformation. And as Wendell pointed out, one of the key things that we need to pin down is our digital ID or EID. And from that, everything would flow much more smoothly. Transactions across all ministries, even, you could use it to do various tasks. So you don't need like multiple IDs, and it should be safe because you say it have various encryption mechanisms in it built in, right? We would talk a little more about the encryption and stuff when we are talking on the trends, right? So thank you very much, Wendell. Right. So we move on to our second section on this discussion, where we talk about the discussion on trending topics in digital governance society. Right. And some of the trending topics is mobility, right? Data and analytics, cybersecurity, cloud computing and storage, and last but not least, customer experience. Right now, the mobility one is fairly simple, right? Users and customers need to access websites and stuff like that on the fly, right? So you need access for smartphones and tablets and stuff like that. And people who have, built-in, stationary cards and stuff like that, that you have to go in and punch in manually and stuff, that is phasing out at the moment, right? So we have a discussion on the second topic right now, which is data analytics and AI useful for digital governance and society, right? Would anyone out of the panel like to answer that? Ravi or Wendell or Lequanne?
Well, I'll jump in here for a second. Lequanne, just before you come in, I just want to say that data and analytics, that's a key component. It's based on good quality data, and again, when you have that data, you can use it to see where the benefits can be applied across the country. It is not simple, but it does allow you to look at things like birth rates, death rates, types of illnesses, where certain areas are developing, where certain areas are underdeveloped. It'll help you with education. And once people start to compile this data and start getting useful, meaningful information from it, we can see the benefits. And I think there's no doubt that good data across the board will assist government in knowing where to apply limited resources, because we are not dealing with unlimited resources in this world. So I think it's a key part of our development. Lequanne, I'll pass it on to you because you can add to that.
Yeah, great point. I agree with you on that. I would add to that, having a healthy approach to data. So, data doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be, consistently collected in a perfect way, which is something that I find sometimes is a flaw in other contexts. But having an understanding that, data standards can enable that good quality data that lets you make those insights. And then also, I would say that, having those kind of insights help you to anticipate needs. So for example, you can integrate benefit delivery. So if somebody loses their job and they file the taxes, you can have triggers that allow them to, start a process to get their EI, employment insurance within the next few weeks. They can start that process. So I think things like that, or even providing receipts. So for example, if somebody, applies for a service and, sometimes it might take longer than expected, having those automated receipts so that people know what step they're at in a process really helps the citizens understand what's happening with their data. So I'd say like finding ways to use those insights to improve your services. Just like Ravi said, like to be able to provide resources to places where you might not be able to get insights previously would be a great approach to using that data analytics to improve government services.
All right, thanks. Great answer. Wendell, you want to add anything or move on to the next question?
We can move on. I think the answer is basically either customer service and insights or efficiency in your operations. So it's up to you. And as Lequanne said, it doesn't have to be perfect. Important thing is the insights and what you do with it.
All right, good stuff. Right, so our next topic is security in digital transformation. Is it needed? Is it necessary? Right, I'd like to start off the answers with Ravi, as he's the expert in cyber at the moment. Ravi, could you give us a comment on cyber?
So is it necessary? Absolutely. Security is at the key of this digital transformation. However, what I would like to say is that security is everyone's business. It is not just the business of government or the people providing the technologies. I think people need to be aware of their own personal responsibilities to look after their data. And we see this time and time again online. People post on Facebook, oh, this is my daughter's birthday and my daughter's name is this, born on that date, and my first house was this. These are the questions the banks will ask you. These are your security questions, and people post it on social media. The number of times we see people, you go and you scrape that information to put together a profile of someone so that you can target them online. So first and foremost, everyone needs to take responsibility for their security. It is not a technology or government issue alone. We will provide support and we will do things to enable the best practices. But the reality is the weakest link starts with you, and it's everyone's responsibility. So that's the first takeaway in that regard. The other part is, look, technology is there. For those who remember, the good old days, you could leave your doors open, you went out, you left your house, everything was unlocked. All of a sudden, you had to lock your doors, then you had to put wrought iron bars. Next thing you know, you had the alarm, the dogs, things evolve. And security is also changing even in the digital sphere. And I think it is absolutely critical, that we use the best practices. I've seen some interesting questions in how that will be done. And yes, there will be cyber incidents, there will be pen testing going on, there will be constant monitoring. But if we get the basics right, if each person is responsible, if we get the access controls right, if we make sure that we're on the right versions of anything, if we train people, if we know what we have, these basics will go a long way in ensuring a secure, and I use the word secure because we know the world we live in, but it will go a long way in ensuring a secure environment for people to operate in and to feel safe in. And that's the goal of persons like myself, to lend support to ensure that we can get people on board to behave in that manner that will keep their data safe and private and protect them.
All right, thanks, Ravi. You summed up almost everything there. Anybody else would like to add anything, or we can?
I'll add something. I'll add a few lines. I would also say that the biggest hack is social engineering. It's not necessarily online. So I know within Canada, with the CEIB, the biggest problem we had was people were calling folks as the CRA and getting them to get some information over the phone. It wasn't an email, it wasn't a website, it was just a phone call. And so, having those service standards, people know that, okay, government's never going to call you on the phone. They're never going to do these certain things. People know what something is a hack. I would say that, another example internally is that, senior officials often get requests from both vendors that will send an email, requesting of a seat for a certain service that was not provided. And so there's things like that where, as I said, training is essential, but also understanding that you're likely to get phished, an email with a fake email or a fake website, and recognizing those tools of manipulation, essentially. And so there is an element of having to educate and make people digitally literate so they understand when they're looking at something that's not true online. And we have several examples of that within COVID, misinformation, things like that. So there is that element of teaching the public to look out for those signs of false information.
All right, great.
I just want to add as well. I mean, there are two types of people in this world: those who've been hacked, and those who don't know they have been hacked. So it's important that we really hacked, and cyber resiliency is an important element in terms of backups and continuity, and having your critical data stored with proper data loss prevention mechanisms in place.
Very good comment, Wendell. Thanks. Right. So once you heard it from the three panelists, right? Cybersecurity is on the forefront, is very essential for digital governance. Because there are hackers everywhere and they are evolving hacking methods every day as well, right? So to talk about our next item on trending topics, which is the advantages of having cloud computing and storage on, the online applications in digital governance, right? Would anyone like to start off the conversation?
I could go.
Okay.
I know for cloud, essentially one of the major considerations was that we were able to gain insights to business processes, deliver apps more easily, and then essentially working with vendors that allowed us to set the standards. So for example, if you're using cloud, using various servers, we could have standards around data residency, so data has to reside within Canada, or information needs to be held on a separate server for government services only. And then by outsourcing that, you have several mechanisms where you can, integrate cybersecurity, integrate automatic updates, reduce costs where necessary, things like that. So, beyond the simple answer of, you can easily access information from anywhere easily, it's more than that, where you're able to have an approach where the information is standardized. You can then implement anything you want within that system and provide those services. You also have access to talent that lets you, roll out new services very quickly because you outsource part of your infrastructure. And so there's many benefits to it, beyond like cost reduction, things like that. But it helps you provide a more efficient way of, updating and allowing people to, embrace the changes over time technology without having to, only work within an on-premise system where you're very restricted to what exists in the past. You can, embrace what's coming in the future as well.
So Lequanne, I mean, I fully agree. The cloud is an inevitability. It's here. We're already interacting with the cloud. I think, though, from a citizenship perspective, I think one of the challenges we face in the Caribbean is data centers and data sovereignty, and where does it reside? Do we keep it? There's a lot of the data privacy legislation indicates that it should be kept on island. We don't have those large-scale data centers on island, so some of the benefits of the cloud are lost. But I think, as we start thinking where best to keep our data and what and the legislation allows us to, we will start to see that change coming about. But the reality and what I'd like to take away for everyone is we're already there. Whether you realize it or not, most places and most countries are working in a hybrid, some form of hybrid environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Estonia has a
So I
good
wanted
example,
to-
though. So go ahead.
Yeah, Wendell.
Yeah, so I just want to take over what Ravi said. Hybrid cloud is the way to go because based on your data and your services, you want flexibility, and you want the flexibility of being able, for instance, low cost services that you don't want to distract you, putting it on a low cost cloud that's non-proprietary. You also want the flexibility of some very maybe seasonal services that are not necessarily practical to keep online, to use to a high-end type cloud service, but at the same time, you still want your on-premise capabilities for matters of sovereignty and IT continuity. So hybrid cloud would be the way that we have to go.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Right. Also, one of the like highlighted by Lequanne, one of the key advantages of cloud is your local systems that is just local server based. If that machine is to go down, your whole application temporarily goes down. But if you have it on the cloud, it hopefully you'll get a more seamless running of the application. All right. So we come into the last item on trending topics, which is customer experience in digital governance and society. How important is it? Right now, I saw in Lequanne's presentation, right? They had a very good feedback loop when they were designing their digital transformation system, where they had the customer at the center, right? Lequanne, you could probably elaborate a little bit on the how important is the customer experience in digital governance?
Certainly. I mean, I would say that that's the most important thing. I mean, in the past, IT services provided by the government were essentially done in a waterfall style. So you provide money, you plan it, you deliver, with no insight from anybody. It's essentially just, technical folks making a product, and then you deal with what you have. And so we found that doesn't really work. And so, providing opportunities for users to set the standard of what they need, and telling, technical teams, telling communications teams, design teams, policy, at all stages of development, you want to know what is it that will actually engage the user and help them finish that process very quickly. And so that looks like, accessibility integrated, or, providing opportunities to access the service in various ways, whether it's by phone in the north, where there's very little internet access, or whether it's in person for somebody who's not digitally savvy, or on the phone for somebody who wants to work from home on the sofa, right? So we would test in all those different environments and see what it looks like to provide a service across those different experiences. And I know within our service, we will actually think of extreme examples. So a mother who has a kid on their hand and taking the bus at 8 a.m, thinking about those very extreme examples where they need to have an easy service, and looking at those people and asking them, okay, what part of the process would make you stop? And do you need to spend 20 minutes on a form, and why is that? What part do you get stuck at? What are the questions that are confusing? And you'll see that there's many assumptions that are in our system that we don't know until we ask, right? So it's a major hack, I would say, to really getting right at the answers really quickly. So I recommend it, and it's not just in Canada, but across the world. You'll see that a lot of services that have been improved is because we've actually listened to people and integrated their feedback.
Okay, great. Even in Trinidad, we incorporate some customers, the citizens' feedback. I remember they had a presentation, and after the presentation, they asked for citizens' opinions, and it was documented. Isn't that true, Wendell? You could elaborate a little more on that, please?
Yes, so we have been utilizing some some of the platforms. On our website, we are also looking at something that we're piloting with Connected Cities in Arima. There's a platform called Citizens Lab that we are building out, which will allow the engaging of citizens even before we build what we want. So we go out there and say, "This, what do you want?" And we incorporate their feedback. Now, the thing about it is, now that's one element, taking the feedback, but then in the design of the systems we acquire, we are trying to put that flexibility by design in everything that we're doing. So we are looking for omni-channel solutions that are flexible, scalable, and can allow for customer feedback. But I want to, and also incorporating the ability for continuous improvement. But I also want to say that there is a risk of trying to be all things to all people, because then you end up not serving any particular group very well. So we have to temper that in terms of what is practical. So getting that balance between being all things to all people and, oh, we only do it this way. So that's some experimentation, co-creation, and feedback that we have to get to.
Ken, I would like,
Yes, Ravi.
Wendell did say it correctly, you can't be everything to everybody. But my biggest fear, is the aging population that we have in the Caribbean. So for instance, my mother is 85 years old, technically challenged. And, my fear is that they will get lost in this transformation journey. And so I think, this is a group that has to be thought about, because they're not tech savvy. They're not going to give you the feedback in the way that you would like. They're not going to interact with these technologies in the way that you like. So, it would be nice for us to think how are we going to bring them in? How are we going to teach them? Are we going to create centers in some of the districts around the islands that will allow, older people to be taught how to interact with the government in these new technologies? Because, the beauty of living in the Caribbean is we do have an aging population. We do have a large aging population. And I think that is, they're one group that I believe that we need to sort of pay special attention to. Because, as you retire and you get older, you are interacting more and more, with the government, whether it's for your pension or social benefits or healthcare. So I think it is something that we have to consider, and I want to throw that at Wendell, because I know that his ministry would also be looking at things like that.
Yes. So thank you, Ravi. Actually, we under our digital skills, there is a particular group we're looking at called digital advocacy. So there's some people you are going to put them through emotional trauma to force them to use some of these digital technologies. And we have to accept that persons will not be able to access us digitally. And that's part of the omni-channel. One of the channels is really the ability for in-person care. Now we are going to do it two ways. Through our government channels, where you go to an access center. That's why we're trying to build out as many access centers as possible. You can go to an access center, get support, get access to service, whether it is you want someone to assist you in doing it, or you want someone to assist you in setting up your device to do it. So you'll be able to have an access center to do that. The other element of the assistance is obviously some persons, in addition to the training that you give to the persons, it is ensuring that, okay, even if I started this online, if I get stuck, I can have a non-virtual recourse, because it is to accept that persons will have challenges, they will have emergencies. So we can't shut out the door to that population. And some persons are really never going to pick up a tablet or a computer to interact with government. But what I always tell my team, though, is that when the US Embassy said they're not taking any more in-person appointments, I didn't see a single person over 80 fail to get their US visa. So digital advocacy is key. And to that end, we also want to empower part of our digital economy is we want to empower private sector. This is an opportunity for you to provide brokerage services to persons like that. And someone in the chat mentioned differently able as well.
All right, good answer, Wendell, and good point, Ravi. So Ravi actually jumped to the third section for our discussion. No problem, Ravi. Thank you very much. So we enter the third discussion now, which is on a discussion on the challenges faced by digital governance, right? And one of the major challenges, as Ravi and Wendell pointed out, is trying to, incorporate people and citizens who are not, the elderly, who are not tech savvy into this digital era, right? And as Wendell pointed out, they are actually implementing a number of access centers to actually aid these people who are not tech savvy. Another thing that the government is actually doing is that NASC and YTEP are currently offering free computer literacy courses for citizens in Trinidad and Tobago throughout their various centers to help, the population become tech savvy, right? So there's a drive, and hopefully, a lot of people would accept it. Of course, there are one or two people who would be stern in their ways, but you can't help that in big transformations like this, right?
But, Ken, one of the things that I will tell you, I think that in our primary schools, we need to start teaching kids how to program. We need to start it that young, not because they will go on to become programmers, but they will understand how the world functions. They will understand, they will have a basic understanding of it. And I think that education, is key. And I think we need to start it in our schools, get them started on it really young.
That is true. That actually was a topic that came up yesterday, right? And everyone agreed as that as well, right? So we're going on to, right, I want to wrap up in a couple minutes, right? I want to go on to something Wendell mentioned in his presentation with regards to, employee resistance to change. And, you're solving the gap, with persons who don't have specialized IT skills. How is this a problem in, performing digital transformation? Wendell, you can elaborate a little more on this, please?
So thanks. So one of the things we have to do is, as Lequanne and other people would have said, you have to design with the customer in mind. So you have usability. First of all, some things could be very intimidating and not intuitive. That is one element. And surprisingly enough, technical capability is not necessarily the major issue. I think the major issue is trust, because the average citizen will quicker sign up on WeFed TT or what have you than to sign up for a government service, because they always feel the government is spying on you and is going to take your data and is up to something. So there's an issue of trust in there as well. So that's on the citizen side. On the employee side, we have to sometimes we try to rush the change and then make it a bit too painful. And you can't digitize everything. Sometimes you cannot digitize not knowing the reason why things are there. So that's why sometimes you have to allow it to evolve. Now not at a snail's pace, but you try to put a little creative tension there. So what you have to do in terms of creating that creative tension is have the tools and allow people to co-create. So you're not really throwing it down their throat, because persons may have valid reasons for resistance. For instance, in public service, the Exchequer Act, some of the things we may find as intuitive in digital transformation would be illegal unless the act has changed and these sort of things. So one of the other elements in the change management is getting some legislative changes, because persons would be standing by that.
All right, good stuff, Wendell. Right. We'll go on to the last challenge, right? Is the data protection for citizens' personal information, right? As you know, well, we spoke about, you know, the usefulness of cloud and stuff like that. Trinidad currently has a Data Protection Act, right? That, you know, it helps protect these citizens' personal information on one hand, but on the second hand, you know, it prevents from, you know, modernizing the digital transformation by putting all this information up there, right? So we have to come up with very innovative ways to get around, you know, this data protection and, you know, still use digital technologies to help our government agencies, right? Lequanne, could you elaborate a little more on data protection for citizens' personal information?
Yeah, I would say, you know, there's a two-pronged approach where, you know, within Canada, we recently changed our privacy laws to allow government departments to share information across departments because it was too protected, where you had long processes, you have to give information individually to each department because of our laws. And so I find that having a balance between, you know, enabling government internally to share information and then providing opportunities for the citizen to consent to that. So, you know, the information is private, but they can consent to, okay, if I'm sharing information with, for example, in Canada, Health Canada, I am allowing it to be used at Statistics Canada for census data, things like that. And, you know, different kinds of data are protected differently. So health data is protected differently from, you know, your tax data, protected differently from your, you know, information, you know, when you're renewing your license, right? So looking at the kinds of data that you want to protect, you know, whether it's on a private cloud, and then having that public information that can be shared available to citizens. I think Estonia really nailed it with this one, was because they have that portal that, you know, people can individually access on their own laptop, protected with their own key and all that. So they can access information and see what's being touched by different departments. And they have a lot to protect that from, you know, for example, if you access information as a government employee that you shouldn't access, like you're not actually consented to that on the citizen side, they could go to jail, right? So having different approaches to align with how you want to provide your services, what kind of data is protected, and how you want to enforce that with mission data in context, I would look into that.
All right, thanks, Lequanne. I believe too, Trinidad laws with data privacy, it needs a little massaging as well. It's a bit stern at the moment, so we could probably follow Canada's approach to massage it to get things going a little faster, right? This brings us to our last topic on challenges. I'll just do it a quick review, right? How you access if your customers and citizens are ready for digital transformation, right? So I went on invest.co.tt website, and these are some of the statistics that they have. They say a little over 75% of Trinidad and Tobago is 4G, right? And it has coverage, and 77.3% is internet penetration, right? It have 1.08 million internet users, right? It has 5 undersea fiber cables, and, you know, it have inland fiber cables that cover 100% of all populated areas. Trinidad is ranked 3rd in the Caribbean for overall network readiness, right? Using the Network Readiness Index, right? Which, to sum it all up, right? We are ready for digital transformation to a very large extent, right? So let's go on to our final area of discussion, right? I'd like to wrap this up in a couple minutes so I can leave at least the last 10 minutes to take questions from the audience, right? So our last section is discussion on the future of digital governance and society, right? What does a technology-enabled future look for in our country look like, right? The first item is digital governance for the regularization of tech companies, right? Is of course that, all this digital governance, we trying to, improve, or they always saying, diversify the economy, right? And well, digitization is one of the major steps to diversify the company, right? With digital governance, you can have a lot of spin-off tech companies and stuff like that, right? But in order to do that, you probably need regularization laws for them to operate in. What is your opinion on that, Ravi?
Oh, you're right. Legislation has to be in place. We have to protect users. We have to make sure that the infrastructure is in place for this digital journey. But if I look forward to the future and I think of myself and having a unique identifier, my unique ID card, and I think of where can it take me. So a good example I like to give is that, what happens if I am, I leave Trinidad and I'm in Barbados or in Jamaica on vacation and I leave my prescription. Do I have to go to the doctor? But maybe I have my unique identifier, which has my data that I can take it into a pharmacy in another territory and say, here you go, and they can see my records and it's validated and it's tied to me. Wouldn't that be great? That I can have that prescription filled in Barbados, even without having to go to a doctor because there's my information, which I've allowed, But it all ties back together to transparency. Which data do I want to allow? Not everybody will allow the same level of information to be shared. So this is an individual personal decision that you will make, where it goes. And I think that transparency of how your data is being used is critical across the board. But this is the future I'm seeing. I'm seeing my life getting easier. This is the whole purpose of this. This is not for governments to watch you. This is for governments to help you achieve a seamless interaction with them. This is for companies to offer their services. So I see a lot of benefits, and I'm excited about this journey.
Okay, great answer, Ravi. Right, another item is governance over the internet. Right, with so much technology and digitization happening. Luckily, TTMAG does a lot of this aspect in Trinidad. Right, on the board of TTMAG. Drum roll. Good stuff, guys. Right. Another item. I don't know if it's possible or it would be beneficial, is to develop collaborations with other countries to work on digital projects. Like for instance, India, Brazil, and South Africa, acronym IBSA, work together in the area of digital governance. Wendell, do you think it would be beneficial for the country to develop collaborations, even with our sister Caribbean islands, to promote digital projects across the Caribbean?
Yes, actually, there are certain forums through the ITU and CTU. There are initiatives in place. Some things being discussed, interoperability of electronic IDs. There's actually a summit, not just for the Caribbean, but the Caribbean and Latin America. That's in, I think, the 15th of February. That they are going to be discussing and progressing the standards and how they embrace that. Some of the Latin American countries like Argentina, Colombia, etc., are already using what they call a list of lists, the interoperability of the electronic IDs. There are discussions around consolidating data centers or having interoperability being failing over one data center to another. So these discussions are taking place, and under the IDB, there is also an initiative to bring the IT digital transformation ministers and ministers with those responsibilities together to discuss some other initiatives as well.
All right, great stuff, Ravi. Now it's 10 to, right? So I'd like to pause here for a while and give the audience a chance to ask a couple of questions. Right. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists? Going once. Oh yeah, Tracy, I see your hand up. Could you you have the floor?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm going to say that there are a lot of questions in the chat, Ken. A lot of questions.
Could you read out one, Tracy?
Well, I think Wendell Mitchell is answering it now, but maybe we could just speak to it. So there's a lot of questions on TT Connect and what's going on ttconnect.gov.tt. So basically, that if I could just let know what people is happening. That's the government portal that also has a rudimentary electronic ID called TT Connect ID that was being used by many people to do transactions, TT BizLink and e-tax. And it's also being used heavily by the diaspora and other citizens to access government information, forms, etc. So that portal seems to have been down for some time, and there's been no explanation as to what exactly happened, and there's been no time frame for it to be restored. So the question has been being asked as to what's been going on with that. And I'm supporting that question. That was the first question I was asked actually at the start of the session by Rodney Taylor and re-asked by several other people. So we could start with that. Yeah.
So I put a response in the chat. So the TT Connect is up. What is happening is that there was a challenge where they had to change the server, and that required an updating of the URL. And actually, my understanding is I think one or two of the ministries that redirect, you still have the old links. So some of them still have to be updated, but it is operational now. It's just that some of the sites, like I know Indian Revenue, is directing you to the wrong URL, so that has to be updated.
I think so. Let me see if I could clarify what's happening. So TT Connect serves two purposes. One is that which you just mentioned, which has the ID. So that is, I think you just addressed that. But the thousands of pages that were on the site, there's a huge amount of content that was on the site, and a lot of forms as well, downloadable forms that were collated over time. So people have been used, especially overseas people. This is the question that I'm asking. But using that site to access information about government, how to do things in Trinidad and Tobago. It actually had a wizard in how do I do things and et cetera, et cetera. So that has been down for some time. So the portal itself has been down, the portal. And also the gateway to the websites, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is there has been some discussion as we understand that there's been some interesting issues with the back end of it in terms of the age of the servers and so on and so forth. But putting that aside, I guess given that you're here, do you have a time frame for when it will be restored? TT Connect itself, the portal, not necessarily the ID discussion, which you said has been being addressed by the various agencies.
Well, so I'll have to double check that, because my information was from our last meeting that it was operational. And actually we had a chat back and forth earlier this week coming out of something as we realized some persons were being redirected to the wrong URL. So I'll have to check into that and see if it is, and I will get I'll get an official response from TT Connect to the team from iGovTT on that. But our information was that it was back up. It's just that some locations had the wrong URL. So I'll have to double check that.
Okay. And there are a couple other questions in chat. So maybe Ken, you want to go through them, or you want me to read them out for you?
You can ask. Let me read out this one from Roger Chung from COSAT, right? Do we know as as a society, public, private, know what our core business is, what your most important services is, what services increase access to your core business, what cannot be done, broken for an hour, a day, a week, 1 month, and stuff like that. So basically, Roger is asking, do we have any system that prioritizes our digital governance, right? Different system, subsystems and stuff like that.
So we don't as yet, because at present, because of, and Lequanne would have mentioned it, because of the sovereignty of each of the various ministries, they deal with their services and their services only. For us to get involved, we have to establish memorandums of understanding explicitly with each ministry, and even those limit what you can and cannot do. Now, in terms of our digital transformation program, we have identified 9 key ministries, the 5 ministries that deal with IDs and registration, and then you have things like health, you have things like social services, etc. Are the key ministries that we are going to be on national security, etc. So in the key ministries, we are going to work to create some priority end-to-end digital services for. I think also land and fisheries, and so there are some that we are in discussion. Ministry of Education, we're in heavy discussion with, but these things will be subject to memorandum. You have to, because our laws have not been amended like they did for Canada, we have to go through explicit MOU processes.
Wendell, can I just add one thing? I do believe ministries are engaging firms such as ours to do business impact analysis. This is something that they've always done. I know throughout the Caribbean and different territories that the individual ministries will reach out at different periods of time as they try to understand their business. So I think it may not be a centralized approach, but I do believe that a lot of the ministries are engaging in these type of activities, especially as we are moving into a more digitized world, so they are conducting these.
All right, great stuff, guys. Unfortunately, we reached our time limit of 10 o'clock, right? We had a great conversation today, right? We covered 4 areas. The first one, the panelists gave presentations of examples of digital governance and transformation. Secondly, we discussed some of the trending topics in digital governance and society, such as mobility, data analytics, cybersecurity, cloud computing and storage, and customer experience. Then we spoke about some of the challenges faced in digital governance, like dealing with those that are not tech savvy, the elderly, right? Employee resistance to change, right? And accessing if your customers are ready for digital transformation, and the Data Protection Act for citizens' personal information. And lastly, we covered items on how the future would look in digital governance, right? In terms of regularization for tech companies, government and private sector working together, right? Developing collaborations with other countries and stuff like that, right? So we are there. This is a huge topic, and I strongly believe an hour and a half wasn't enough to talk about it, but we covered a tremendous amount, and I'd like to thank everyone for listening on and logging in, right? I'll hand it over now to Tracy.
Actually, I will take it over there. Ken, thanks very much. Ken, a wonderful presentation here. Hats off to you guys. I think you really kept us in queue and in check. So we're going to have a 9-minute break. It would have been 10, but a 9-minute break. And we start promptly at 10:10. So go wet your throat, take a little fire, stretch your legs, and I'll see you back in the next, looks like 8 minutes now. Bye. Take care. See you in a bit.
Okay.
Bye, everyone. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.